In this video, we will focus on what are some of the root causes of social vulnerability.
What are some of the root causes of social vulnerability?
Historic and ongoing racial discrimination, poverty or economic instability, limited English language proficiency and barriers to language access.
Collectively, these three factors, race, low income, and limited English speaking ability, are captured in the state's environmental justice policy. This law acknowledges that because of these factors, specific communities have had access to fewer environmental benefits and have been exposed to greater environmental harms, including the effects of climate change. It calls on the state, municipalities, and communities to pay greater attention to environmental impacts in neighborhoods that have been identified as meeting the EJ criteria in order to redress this harm. This law also emphasizes that to correct for these patterns, members of EJ neighborhoods must be involved in decisions made that affect the community. The state's EJ policy identifies geographic areas where a certain portion of people experience social vulnerability based on race, income, or English language proficiency. However, your municipality may have communities of color, low-income communities, or limited English-speaking communities that do not quite meet the threshold to be identified as an EJ neighborhood, but still experience social vulnerability. Equally important, there are likely many other factors that create vulnerability for people living or working in your town or city that require attention if you want to create climate resilience. These other priority populations may be living with housing insecurity, food insecurity, social isolation, chronic physical or mental challenges, as well as access to health services and basic public health, exposure to environmental pollutants and other environmental hazards, lack of access to nature or other open spaces, lack of access to quality education, lack of access to democratic governance processes.
This is just the short list. The specifics will depend entirely on your community context. There are two things that we want to point out. First is that these are conditions that people are compelled to live with. No one chooses to be discriminated against. No one chooses to be exposed to environmental hazards. Second, while each of these individual factors create social vulnerability, people may be living with multiple factors, which leads to increased harmful impacts from climate change, and those living with multiple factors should be prioritized for action. These conditions are created by other systems and structures that foster vulnerability. A few examples of systems and structures that create vulnerability include
car-centric policies. For example, many municipalities spend large amounts of their budgets clearing roadways for cars after snowstorms, but few, if any, municipalities spend any of their budget clearing sidewalks for our elderly neighbors, our neighbors living with mobility challenges, or parents pushing babies in strollers. Other systems that foster vulnerability include zoning that restricts the construction of multifamily or workforce housing, or that restricts commercial development. These exclusionary zoning policies have the effect of constraining who lives or works in your community by preventing the construction of housing options that are affordable to a wider variety of people and families. Some of our communities are struggling to maintain their voluntary fire or EMS services because younger people who would do this cannot afford to live there. Elders trying to age in place have care workers who live many hours from them. Exclusionary zoning can also contribute to economic vulnerability. For example, if workforce housing is not allowed on or near farms, it makes recruiting seasonal farm workers more difficult and potentially more expensive.
municipal decision-making processes, what we call governance systems, that have the effect of excluding marginalized and vulnerable residents will also result in community-wide social vulnerability. If participation, engagement, and other decision-making processes are not explicitly inclusionary, meaning that they're designed to include people who have been historically neglected and are most impacted by a decision, you will likely make decisions that neglect or ignore those very same vulnerable community members. Historically, when we tolerate exclusionary decision-making systems, the result is public and private disinvestment in the physical and social infrastructure of environmental justice neighborhoods. In the next and final video, we will discuss what are the structures that foster resilience.